A shadow fell upon the land of Egypt. A new Pharaoh ruled, one who did not know Joseph. He feared the growing numbers of the Hebrew people. So he decreed a terrible thing. Every newborn Hebrew boy was to be thrown into the great Nile River. Imagine the terror, the heartbreak of mothers and fathers. It was a time of deep sorrow and desperate measures. Yet, even in the darkest of times, hope can find a way. One mother, Jochebed, sought to protect her precious child. She knew she could not hide him for long from the king's cruel order. She wove a basket of reeds, sealing it with tar and pitch. A tiny ark, made with love and trembling hands, she gently placed her baby boy inside. Then with a prayer whispered on the wind, she set the basket among the tall reeds at the river's edge. His sister, Miriam, watched from a distance, her heart pounding. The fate of her brother rested now with the currents of the Nile, and perhaps with a power far greater. It was an act of profound faith, a gamble against impossible odds. This small vessel carried an immense destiny within its fragile frame. As fate would have it, Pharaoh's own daughter came down to the river to bathe. She noticed the basket hidden among the swaying reeds. Curious, she sent her attendant to retrieve it. When she opened it, she saw the baby boy, crying. Her heart was touched with compassion. She knew this was one of the Hebrew children, yet she chose kindness over cruelty. She decided to save him, to raise him as her own. She named him Moses, for she said, "I drew him out of the water." Thus, a Hebrew child found an unlikely sanctuary in the very palace of his people's oppressor. Moses grew up surrounded by the splendors of the Egyptian court. He learned the wisdom of Egypt, the ways of royalty. He was dressed in fine linens, educated by the best tutors. He was a prince, with all the privileges that came with such a title. For many years he likely lived without knowing his true origins, his hidden identity. But the truth has a way of surfacing. Perhaps he saw the stark contrast between his life and the lives of the Hebrew slaves. A seed of awareness began to grow, a questioning in his soul about who he truly was and where he truly belonged. One day, when Moses was a grown man, he went out to see his own people. He observed their forced labor, their suffering under harsh Egyptian taskmasters. He saw an Egyptian mercilessly beating a Hebrew slave. A fire of indignation, a surge of protectiveness rose within him. He looked around, he thought no one was watching this fateful encounter. In a moment of intense anger and perhaps a deep, unacknowledged loyalty, he struck the Egyptian. The oppressor fell, lifeless, to the ground. This single act changed the course of Moses' life forever. The prince had shed blood to defend his kin. The very next day, Moses went out again. This time, he saw two Hebrews quarreling fiercely. He tried to intervene, to make peace between them, but one of them pushed back, saying, "Who made you a ruler and a judge over us? Are you thinking of killing me as you killed the Egyptian?" Moses was stunned. His deed was known. The news would surely reach Pharaoh's ears. He understood then that his position in the palace was gone, his life in Egypt forfeit. The comfort and security he had known were now replaced by imminent danger. He knew he had to flee. So Moses ran. He left behind the pyramids, the chariots, the power of Egypt. He journeyed eastward into the vast, unforgiving desert of Midian. This was a land of stark beauty, of silence and solitude. The sun beat down by day and the stars shone with incredible clarity by night. It was a place for reflection, a place where one might be stripped of all pretense. He was an exile, a fugitive, far from the only home he had ever known. The desert became his harsh teacher, shaping him in ways the palace never could. He was learning a new way to exist. In the land of Midian, weary from his journey, he sat down by a well. There, he encountered the daughters of Jethro, a priest of Midian. When other shepherds tried to drive them away, Moses stood up for them and helped water their flock. Jethro, hearing of his kindness, welcomed Moses into his home. Moses found a measure of peace there. He married Zipporah, one of Jethro's daughters. He became a shepherd, tending his father-in-law's flocks. For many years he lived this simple, pastoral life, a stark contrast to his princely upbringing. But destiny had not forgotten him. Years passed in the quiet rhythm of a shepherd's life. Moses led his flocks through the wilderness, seeking pasture and water. He became familiar with the desert's moods, its dangers, and its hidden oases. One day, he led his sheep to the far side of the wilderness. He came to Horeb, the mountain of God. This was a place of awe, a place that seemed to hum with ancient power. Little did he know this ordinary day was about to become the most extraordinary day of his life. He was about to encounter the divine in a way that would change him and the world forever. Suddenly, he saw a sight that made him stop in his tracks. A bush was ablaze with fire, yet it was not consumed. The flames danced and flickered, but the leaves remained green, the branches intact. It was an impossible vision, a paradox of nature. Moses was filled with curiosity and wonder. He thought, I must go over and see this strange sight, why the bush does not burn up. He approached cautiously, drawn by this inexplicable phenomenon. It was a signal, a clear indication that something sacred, something beyond the ordinary, was taking place on that lonely mountainside. As Moses drew nearer to the burning bush, a voice called out to him from within the flames. "Moses, Moses," it said, and Moses replied, "Here I am." The voice then identified itself. "I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob." At this, Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. He was standing on holy ground, in the very presence of the Creator. The shepherd from Midian was now face to face with the Eternal. It was a moment of profound revelation and overwhelming awe. Then God spoke of his deep compassion. He had seen the misery of his people in Egypt. He had heard their cries of anguish because of their slave drivers. He knew their suffering. And so, God declared his plan. He would rescue them from the hand of the Egyptians. He would bring them up out of that land into a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey. And Moses, the humble shepherd, the fugitive prince, was chosen for this monumental task. "So now go," God commanded. "I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt." Moses, though initially hesitant and full of self-doubt, eventually obeyed God's call. He returned to the land of Egypt, accompanied by his brother Aaron, who would be his spokesman. Together they stood before the mighty Pharaoh. They delivered the divine ultimatum. "Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, let my people go, so that they may hold a festival to me in the wilderness." But Pharaoh's heart was hard. He scoffed at their words. "Who is the Lord," he asked, "that I should obey him and let Israel go? I do not know the Lord, and I will not let Israel go." The stage was set for a divine confrontation. Because Pharaoh refused, God unleashed a series of devastating plagues upon Egypt. The Nile turned to blood. Frogs swarmed the land. Gnats and flies tormented the people. Livestock died. Boils afflicted Egyptians. Hailstorms ravaged the crops. Locusts consumed what was left. A thick darkness enveloped the land for 3 days. With each plague, Moses and Aaron repeated God's demand, yet Pharaoh's heart remained stubborn, unyielding. Finally, God announced the most terrible plague of all, the death of every firstborn son in Egypt. Only after this devastating blow did Pharaoh finally, desperately tell the Israelites to leave. The Hebrews departed from Egypt with great haste, carrying unleavened dough because there was no time for it to rise. Their centuries of bondage were over. They were on their way to freedom, but Pharaoh's resolve crumbled once more. He regretted letting his workforce go. He mustered his army, his chariots, and his horsemen, and pursued the fleeing Israelites. He cornered them against the shores of the Red Sea. Trapped, with the sea before them and the Egyptian army behind, despair set in. But Moses, holding his staff high, stretched his hand out over the sea. God sent a strong east wind and the waters parted, creating a path of dry land for the Israelites to cross. They walked through the sea with a wall of water on their right and on their left. When the Egyptians tried to follow, God commanded Moses to stretch out his hand again. The waters returned, engulfing Pharaoh's entire army. Not one of them survived. The Israelites were truly free. They journeyed onward through the challenging wilderness, guided by a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. Eventually they arrived at the foot of Mount Sinai, the very mountain where God had first appeared to Moses in the burning bush. Moses ascended the smoke-wreathed peak. There, in the awesome presence of God, he received the 10 Commandments and the laws that would shape Israel into a nation, a people bound by a sacred covenant.